Hey everyone, this is Dr. Casey Johnson. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to the Unlock Wellness Podcast. I know you're going to love today's episode with Davey. Matthew is doing some amazing work, so I'm excited to have him on to share a story with you guys. If you've been loving the Unlock Wellness Podcast, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. The Unlock Wellness Podcast is now on patreon.com. Patreon is an amazing site that allows you to support your favorite podcasts. You can learn more by going to patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson. Also, be sure to follow me on social media to keep up with the latest podcast episodes. The best way to connect with me is on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. My username across the board is at Dr. Casey Johnson. That's DrKaseyJohnson. You can also check out my website at drcaseyjohnson.com. It has all of the past podcast episodes and more information about each guest under the Listen tab. While you're on my site, be sure to check out the Shop tab, where you can check out my first book of my Healthy Children's Book series and learn about the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. Thank you again for listening. I hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired to start making positive changes to your health. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Davey. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Davey, and Matt is host of the Vedge Talk Podcast, and it's just doing some really positive work in the plant-based world. So I'm excited to have him on to share a story and everything that he's been working on. So, Matt, just thank you so much again for taking time to come on. I'm excited to have you.
Casey, I'm excited to be on the podcast. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we jump into the amazing work that you're doing right now, why don't you kind of walk us through your backstory? First off, where you're from, and then what's your health and wellness look like at a younger age?
Cool. So I'm from, if you can't tell by the accent, I'm from Australia. So I'm currently living in America, but yeah, most of my life I've spent back at home in Australia. I was born in Adelaide and moved to Melbourne when I was about 3 years old. So didn't spend a whole lot of time in Adelaide, don't have a lot of memories, but moved over to Melbourne with my mum, dad, and younger brother. And yeah, I lived there till I was about 23 years old. So yeah, I was saying to a podcast guest the other day, like we all feel like I think we had like a pretty regular childhood. I think you don't know any better. So yeah, we were brought up in, a nice neighborhood, had great friends, still have good friends back at home. And yeah, went to school, university, started, all my first jobs were back home in Melbourne. And in terms of wellness, that's been quite the journey, I suppose. So mum and dad definitely, looked after us in terms of, food and exercise. Me and my brother were both into sports from a young age. So, as far back as I can remember playing, Aussie rules football, soccer, cricket, baseball, tennis, you name it, really. Anything that was thrown at us, we were happy to do. So always really active kids. I was always a really thin kid as well. And I think, being thin throughout the majority of my life, I think that had some correlation in not really thinking about the food. I never really thought about what the food was actually for. Never made the connection that it was actually there to fuel the body. It was more just something to eat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that kind of cycle. So I personally never really made the connection till really recently, as embarrassing that is to say. But luckily mum and dad definitely were on the healthier side themselves, and made sure that our school lunches were healthy, what we knew to be healthy anyway,
Right.
So what we thought was healthy. So rarely would I go to the school canteen, we would call it, to get lunch, to like buy a lunch. It was always packed by mum. she did a really, really good job. Home cooked meals, the high majority of the time. And the only real time where I now look back and think, where we really weren't making the connection was there was a period where we were doing Monday night barbecues. So Dad had come home from work early and he'd cook a barbecue, and Mum would get in the kitchen and cook these amazing salads. She'd make these amazing salads, but we'd get to the dinner table and Dad had, he'd have lamb chops, sausages, chicken wings, all the, just like a lot of meat, heavy, right, fried egg, that kind of stuff. And we'd all load up on that, and like, a small portion of the plate would be salad. So I do kind of think back to that, and I got to apologize to Mum because she was doing an amazing job making these really healthy salads, but we were just going for now what I would call junk.
Right.
But that was all, under Mum and Dad's roof. And then as I got more freedom in terms of like my finances and my choices outside of the house, after getting, I think I got my first job when I was about 15 years old, and you start spending, more time on your own. You've got more choice with food. I think I definitely went, more often than not towards the junky foods.
Right.
Also start, in high school, I know it's a little different here with the drinking age, but, even like at age 15, starting to drink alcohol and at parties. Then more down the line, I actually, started drinking pretty heavily most weekends. I'd even, I'd take drugs every now and again, not regularly, but that was kind of the road I was going down, was the after high school, university, 9-to-5 job, and really the weekends were just a blowout. I would call it that. So yeah, I started to kind of lose my way with my connection, if I had any, but the connection with what I was putting into my body. I went to Europe for 7 months before coming to America, and that continued. If not, it got exacerbated. That was really a 7-month party. It was a lot of fun. We went to a lot of different countries, a lot of beautiful countries in Europe.
Was it like a study abroad?
No, I did do study abroad when I was about 21 years old. And again, that, if anything, that exacerbated the life at home. I think in Australia we do have a fairly heavy drinking culture, and it's not frowned upon at all.
What's the legal age in Australia?
18.
Okay.
So it's 3 years younger than here in America.
Right.
From what I understand, it doesn't really stop Americans, but maybe we start younger. And I do believe that us and the UK have a fairly low tolerance when it comes to, it's really, really accepted. So yeah, we definitely push the limits from a young age, I suppose. And it, it just steamrolls from there. You develop habits when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, and they tend to carry on throughout life. You might reel them in a little bit, but I think that's where we create that foundation. And yeah, went to Europe for 7 months with some friends. And yeah, I have a picture. I wish I could show it. I might be able to send it to you afterwards. I showed.
Please do.
Yeah, I did a podcast today, and I showed my guest the photo, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, "Whoa, you're like unrecognizable." So like, put on a lot of weight in like the neck area, the face area. Like my head is a different shape, more or less.
How much weight did you gain during that period?
I've never been big on the scales, to be honest. Never really weighed myself, but it's visible. Gotcha. It's visible. Definitely, had quite like a gut going on.
It's one of those things, Matt, like you were saying, you grew up a small kid, so it was hard because you weren't thinking about it. It's just one of those things. It's like it's a blessing and a curse, right? It's great because you're thin, and that makes life as a young kid a lot easier. But at the same time, you don't know what's happening, or you don't really acknowledge it or really care what's happening on the inside because your body's responding fine. I think that's the problem with a lot of adults that stay thin even while eating really bad, because that's when they really don't discover health issues until it's too late. So it can be almost just as, more dangerous when you're just a naturally thin person, because you're just not as aware as you should be.
Yeah, you're spot on. And we often talk about, like obesity being a huge problem, which it is. There's high numbers in Australia, the UK, America, Western countries. But what we often don't talk about is the people that, we would consider in maybe a healthy weight range, or aesthetically they look thin.
Right.
We don't really talk about them also being at risk for things like heart disease, because heart disease doesn't really discriminate. You don't have to be overweight to drop dead of a heart attack at 50. If you've eaten really badly, or a combination of not eating well and sedentary lifestyle, it's definitely possible, and we're seeing more and more of it today. So
yeah, definitely.
I would say I was heading down that road, and moved to America after being in Europe for 7 months, which a lot of my friends thought was, only going to make it worse, coming to the land of the burger and the hot dog, as we kind of knew it. So yeah, not long after moving here, I met my now girlfriend. So we've been together for 4.5 years. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been amazing. When we did meet each other, we kind of both living the same kind of lifestyle. So still that travel mentality, partying on the weekends and working during the week. But once we moved in together and started living together, that's when things actually started to change. And Anna definitely triggered it. So she was unhappy with her weight. And at that time, mind you, I was still smoking cigarettes and drinking on the weekends. So just really not treating my body very well. But Anna decided that she was going to start eating a lot healthier and also exercising a lot more frequently. And she saw some pretty drastic changes to how, not only how she was looking on the outside, but also how she was feeling. And that really spurred her to do what she's doing now. So she's into health and fitness blogging, fitness instructor here in Boston. But that was really where the journey started for us. And I suppose when your partner starts to bring home that mentality and the fridge starts to fill up with more produce, we start shopping together in the farmer's market and things like that. That's when it really started to change for both of us. So
whenever she started making those changes, like at that point, were you aware that you could feel better? Like, was your energy taking a toll? Like, were you feeling it and you were kind of feeling the same way she just made the first move? Or kind of where were you at kind of mentally at that point before she made the changes, or like right before she was about to?
Yeah, the way I explained it today was, we all, as humans, we kind of, and I've heard many other people explain it this way as well, is like you create this new normal.
Right.
So although in reality, mentally, physically, I probably wasn't feeling that good at all, you build this normal, and it's your day to day. So you don't know any better for like the recent time that you've had, like give or take a couple of years. You've built it that way, you feel that way, and you don't know any different. So when we started to change our food habits, and we were still eating all animal products at that point, it was just we were adding more produce, so less processed foods, more produce, and we created a new normal. So I suppose health is a spectrum, and we started to move along that spectrum. And yeah, it probably took a year of shopping at the farmer's market and still collecting all animal products from the farmer's market to start moving further along the spectrum. So we'd start watching documentaries that would get us thinking about the types of foods we were eating. I think Anna was on that typical kind of like chicken, broccoli, brown rice kind of diet.
Right.
I was still eating pretty liberally, but working out a lot more. So I was getting into shape. I was running, and we started watching documentaries, and I think like things like Food Inc. started to open up our eyes to like factory farming.
Food Inc. was that was one of my first ones that I saw too. And I mean, total eye opener. Like, I think when I watched that, I had no idea any of that first time I watched it. And it just like blew my mind. I mean, they're just, those documentaries are so powerful.
Yeah, they're good. They give you a real visual. So what we lack, or what we, I would say that there's plenty of documentaries out there now, but what we may have lacked in the past growing up was being given that visual representation of really how our food arrives on the plate. We didn't make any connection. It was just all taste,
Right.
It was what we knew and it tasted good. And we didn't necessarily see it as bad for us. We saw smoking as bad for us, and I still took that up for like 5 or 6 years. I also worked in a deli growing up, so slicing meat, slicing cheese. I did that for like a good 5 years, and still I didn't make the connection.
Right.
And I'm literally holding, these body parts, but zero connection. And that movie definitely opened up our eyes, and we started to ask questions. So I think the next week I literally went back to the farmer's market and went to the butcher and started asking questions like, are these chickens from factory farms? And he said, yes. And we could tell because the chicken was really large in size. Like I hung it up one day in front of, I was chopping and I like lifted it up and I said, this can't be right. Like these are huge and they're kind of like discolored. And yeah, so I think we didn't even cook it. We got rid of it then and there and decided to stop eating chicken. Experimented with like free range, all that marketing,
right?
That they throw at you. We experimented with that for like a week, but decided just by way of economics that it was ridiculously expensive, and we didn't really want to pay for that. So same with the beef. Went back to the butcher the next week and said, hey, is this corn fed or grass fed? Because from what we learned in that documentary, we thought that would be a better option. And we went 1 week on the grass fed stuff and decided that it was just too expensive. So yeah, again, our wallet was saying don't do it. Unfortunately, it wasn't from like an ethical standpoint. It wasn't from a health standpoint even. It was just purely, we don't want to shop from a factory farm, and this alternative is too expensive. And I don't think it took that much longer after that. But Anna was out one night at an event for work, and I watched a documentary called Plant Pure Nation, which I think soon followed. Yeah, soon after Forks Over Knives. Netflix kind of gives you those options to view this because you viewed so and so. So
then you're in the rabbit hole and you're just gone, right?
I went down the Forks Over Knives rabbit hole,
yeah.
and from that day on, I really texted Anna not that long into the documentary. I remember just saying we're going vegan, and I used to say like we're not going to put labels on our eating habits. That's ridiculous. And there I am texting her saying, we're going plant based, and she's like, oh really? When? And I was like, tomorrow, like
right now.
We're doing it right now.
Right.
Everything out of the fridge got moved to the bin. Yeah, we went full on into it, and yeah, never really looked back. There were a few hiccups traveling. I remember 2 times going to Chicago, not long after we decided to do it. Yeah, we were traveling, weren't really prepared. We went to a restaurant and went to a baseball game. And I think they were really the only 2 hiccups we made along the way. And that's really my health journey. And it was all for health. My real perception of what aging was, I'd seen 2 grandparents pass away from cancer in their early 70s. And my perception of aging was just, it was kind of like luck of the draw. It was, you do your best, and it seems like most people get chronic disease these days. So I'd kind of really just, thought that's how it went for most people. And if it was to happen to me, then so be it. But watching those documentaries, and if you've seen them, if you haven't, I highly recommend watching them. But you get to see, doctors that have, not even athletes, doctors that have worked on this for decades and applied the science to their lifestyle, and they're moving around just fine in their 80s. They're riding bicycles and running. And in that moment, my mind just like didn't know what was going on. I was like, whoa, like I wanted to call my family. text my brother, text friends, tell everyone at work about it. It was like, holy shit, this is amazing.
I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, it really just takes those blinders down because the industry does an amazing job at not letting you know exactly where it comes from for a reason, just because that way you don't have any type of like connection to it. So they do amazing at what they do at keeping people disconnected, but it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I do love, Matt, that you did take like those stepping stones so you could kind of figure out for yourself what worked best. And obviously, you made your way to being vegan, but like, and something else you brought up that I think is really interesting is that you actually like thought to ask the butcher and, where you were getting your chicken from, the source of it, because most people don't. And like, it's important to realize how common it is. I mean, and even like with like labeling laws, right? Like you could say, I think there's like no distinct law for labeling something like grass-fed, for example. I think they could be grass-fed for like a few days or something like that, or even a few hours beforehand, and they can be technically labeled grass-fed. Or I don't know if you actually saw this recently, that Kerrygold butter. It's super known for being like a grass-fed butter, right? And it was pushed along like a lot of like keto trends and things like that. And even back in the day when I was teaching that as well, like, I recommended that whenever I was on that journey for myself. But it actually came out that it's actually not grass-fed. And now all these people are suing the company, and it's just like insane. And yeah, it just blows my mind.
Yeah, no, I think the marketing terms are really, they're designed so that we feel better.
Right.
That's all it really is there for. It's not anything remotely to do with the way the animal is treated, because at the end of the day, they all end up in the same place.
Exactly.
And yeah, it is there for our conscience, and it makes the consumer feel good about buying a certain product. And it's more often than not aimed at wealthier consumers, because these products typically more expensive, and yeah, they'll go into a supermarket, grass-fed, free range, organic, and yeah, it's just another way to keep the blinkers on.
Right. It's just it's crazy. Yeah, and like Matt was saying, like if you haven't watched some of those documentaries that he just mentioned, go check it out, especially if you do eat animal products. I think it'll be a huge eye opener for you. I mean, even things like cows that are fed grains, obviously that's done to fatten them up faster and get them ready for consumption faster. I mean, they even add like candy to the feed for a lot of these places because the increased sugar increases the growth of the cow even more. It just like stuff like that. It's just like, I don't know how that can be possible,
Yeah, they go to insane lengths.
Crazy.
To do this. I think the chickens are a good example. Like they, grow from, tiny little babies to full grown size in like, is it 6 weeks? It's something bananas, but like most of them can't even walk because
right.
the muscle mass is far outweighing their bone structure development. So yeah, these companies are in the business of making money. They're not in the business of looking after animals. And yeah, I empathize with anyone that's eating animal products.
Definitely.
Been there. I was only 2.5 years ago that I was probably putting them in most meals. And there's a lot of documentaries out there, and I would say watch them with an open mind. Don't believe everything that they say, and start doing your own research. Read some other books. Find some quality scientific journals out there that are not sponsored by the industries that provide the products. And that's the best way to really develop our own knowledge, is just by digging ourselves and not taking everything that we hear as gospel.
No, 100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, I mean, even things that we're saying, like, don't believe us, like go research it for yourself and form your own thoughts and opinions based on the research that you check out. So no, that's a very, very important point to make, Matt. And, whenever you and your girlfriend started to make those changes, did you notice any like changes right away, or like what did you notice for yourself specifically as you started to go vegan once you made that choice?
So as we started to do it, we went really all in on the whole food plant-based kind of philosophy. So it's funny to say this, but I think we were stricter in the beginning than what we are now. So we were really like no added salt, no added oils, fully whole food plant-based. Now we do sneak in a couple of, let's call them more fun plant-based meals, every now and again. But the huge differences for me personally were just I tend to eat a lot. I've always had a pretty big appetite, but after a meal, just feeling not like I want to go lay down.
Right.
It was still a good quantity of food, a healthy serving, and I was full, satiated, but really still light. And I think back to one evening, my parents and my uncle were here in Boston, and we went to a Mexican restaurant, and I ate like everyone's leftovers that night. I was like everyone's vacuum cleaner at the restaurant. But afterwards, I could barely move. I was just absolutely stuffed full of food, or full of animal products. And yeah, the difference there was just, I could still eat a huge serving, but it felt good. And then the second thing that I do, actually there's two other things that I do remember, because I didn't really go into it with any expectations. I didn't really think like, oh, hey, I've got like a laundry list of health problems that I'm going to try and change, or I'm on these meds and I'm going to try and get off them. I didn't have anything to kind of refer to apart from just what I could see. So I had a small kind of fungal sore that I'd got checked at the doctor just a couple of weeks before, because I remember she gave me like a cream, and I never opened the box. I never actually started using it. I've never liked using, from a young age, I've never, like even Tylenol as a kid, hated using any painkillers, medicines. I just wasn't a fan of it. And I had this, small kind of fungal red sore on my chest, and that went away and never came back. So I did notice that and thought, that's
awesome.
That was something that kind of was coming and going beforehand. And, I can say 2.5 years down the road, that has showed no signs of resurfacing. The last thing was just on one of my feet, the toenails were infected. They had like fungus underneath the toenails, and it was pretty severe. Like all the toes were affected on one foot, and as disgusting as it is, again, no real medication, no topical solutions, but I've healed, I want to say 95% of it just eating food. So there's still, a tiny bit left, but it's, for the most part, just from eating, which is pretty cool. Just by changing what's on my plate, I've seen some healing on the outside. And then obviously on the inside, I'm sure there's a ton of healing going on. I just can't see it. So, and I think that's where we all get trapped, and we go back to what we were talking about before with thin people. We can't see what's going on the inside. But I think if we all could, we'd all be making some serious changes, because, you can start to see how the blood flow gets affected, how maybe your brain size is changing, or how your organs are looking. Yeah, it's fascinating.
It really is. No, that's amazing that you started to see changes like that. It's like you said, you weren't expecting it to, so it wasn't like, it was obviously a nice surprise. So that's amazing. And like, how'd your family respond to you deciding to do that?
So with family, I remember calling my dad like pretty much immediately, because one of the things on the documentaries referred to cholesterol, and I knew that he was taking a fairly common statin back at home called Lipitor. Not a huge dosage, but from what I'd learned in those documentaries was that these drugs are prescribed to maintain what is called, in the medical industry, like a healthy number,
Right.
It's not there to cure anything. It's just there to maintain. And I called and said, hey, like, I just watched this crazy documentary, and you wouldn't believe it, but like, it's actually quite easy to bring your cholesterol down. It's just really about removing animal products that have cholesterol, replacing them with plant foods that don't. And he was kind of like, oh yeah, cool. you know. And I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. Like, the reaction was just fairly, brushed it off.
How is your mind not blown, Dad?
Yeah, I was like, why wouldn't you? Why, like, these things have side effects, like there are side effects to these drugs, taking them every day. And he was like, yeah, it's just one a day, it's not a big deal. And from then on, I was like, I got my parents probably like once every couple of weeks. And I was terrible. Like I heard the term angry activist today. I think I fell into that category. I was a bit of an angry activist with my family, not so much with people elsewhere.
I think that's common, though. I think that's common for a lot of people that make that decision at first,
Yeah, I think it's just everyone means well. Like
you get so excited.
Yeah, you're talking to your loved ones as well, and what their kind of diet has been like over, their journey. And it's not really to offend them. It's just saying like, hey, we can kind of do better. Right. And we can potentially slap like 5-10 years on the end of our life that are healthy. They're not necessarily spent in nursing homes. And that's what I grew up seeing. I grew up seeing, two grandparents spend their last years being looked after and declining. And I now know that with some pretty easy self-care kind of tactics in relation to our diet and lifestyle, we can really turn that around. So yeah, it was coming from a good place, but I did go over the top. I know Anna used to kind of pinch me on my leg, like when we're on these Skype sessions, like, Matt, stop, like you're going too far. And we kind of debrief after the call. And Anna's like, you're digging in way too hard. They're not going to respond well. And yeah, after a while I laid off, but they've made some really good changes themselves. I think they eat mainly plant-based at home. Like, it took a while, but Mum got off the milk pretty quickly, but Dad also ended up getting off the cow's milk and onto, like a soy or a nut milk. I don't think they have like, any yogurt or cheese anymore. Maybe like, I think Mum said like an egg here and there with baking, but I'm not going to knock them. They've definitely done a really good job. I don't think my brother has made a heap of changes, but he definitely frequents more, plant-based restaurants every now and again, which I don't think we would have done previously. So again, it's a journey, and health is definitely a spectrum, and hopefully people just jump on sooner rather than later, because I suppose there does come a time when it is too late and you can't really make changes and reverse the illness that is developing.
Definitely. Yeah. And just like you're saying, just sometimes people just need to take baby steps. Like, I mean, both, you and I both had to go on that journey to get there, through just changing stuff. And then it's grass-fed meat, and then it's not, and then it's just plant-based. So it's just like everybody has to go through what they have to go through to get there. And yeah, I totally respect it as well. And obviously that's really helped fuel what you do. And, I love what you're doing, Matt. And I love that you're doing a podcast now. So, so what really inspired you to want to start your podcast?
So basically I still am, I'm working full time, and yeah, I just wanted to find a way that I could contribute, I suppose, to the community. And I heard like, it was quite funny. I think it was a Joe Rogan episode, and I'd been throwing up the idea of a podcast for a while, and I had like a big sheet of paper up on a wall with like potential podcast guests, equipment that I might need.
That's awesome.
And, weighing up whether I go, really big on the audio side of things or the video side of things, just thinking about it. But I heard, he was interviewing someone, or he typically has conversations. And I don't mind Joe Rogan, for any plant-based people out there. I know he cops a lot of stick, but I think it's good to kind of go back sometimes to, the other conversations that people are having, because it's easy to build a vegan bubble around you with social media these days. But yeah, to go back to him every now and again to listen to a conversation, He's really good at what he does.
He's very good. He's very good.
Yeah, so I highly recommend people just, venturing out of what we develop in our social media channels every now and again, because it does bring things back for you. But someone said, like, hey, Joe, don't you think it's pretty cool that, you've developed this just from your voice? Like, your voice has created what you have today. He's a stand-up comedian, he's a podcast host, and he's a UFC commentator. And he was kind of like, yeah, that is pretty cool. And I'd been tossing up this idea, and I think with a bit of help from Anna, hearing stuff like that, it was like, yeah, let's just do it. So, you jump on Amazon, you've got all this stuff at your doorstep in 2 days, and it's like, oh, I better start. So really just wanted to share people's stories that, I could get out into the public so people can listen. And I know that my story isn't going to resonate with everyone. So there's no point me repeating it over and over again. Share other people's stories, and that way, you're gonna welcome in a wider audience, and hopefully through good conversation, it's going to spark conversation in other families, other friendship circles, other offices. Yeah, just the other day, as an example, I was on a call for work, and I'd never met the guy on the other end of the phone, and it was a Monday, and I was just like, how's your weekend? And he said, it was good. It was what much needed. I had a big week traveling with work, 4 cities in 4 days, and got home on Friday, and I was happy to get home. And he was like, how was your weekend? I was like, it was good. I was in New York doing a few podcast episodes. And he's like, oh, what's your podcast all about? And I was like, I pretty much do like vegan, plant-based podcasts, just sharing stories of, business owners, athletes, doctors, animal activists, whatever it is. I just want to share a whole ton of stories. And he goes, Matt, this is really funny timing that we're having this conversation, because I've just gone vegetarian for the first time in like my whole life.
That is really cool.
And I'm a triathlete. And I'm like, that's funny you say that. I just interviewed an Ironman triathlete and an ultra runner, both plant-based, husband and wife couple. And he was like, I just subscribed. Done. So stuff like that is exactly why I'm doing it. And yeah, it's just been a ton of fun. Outside of the regular job, I've met some amazing people, already made some, really strong connections. And I'm just super glad that, I made the decision to do it.
I love that. No, it's definitely the best. And I mean, I'm extremely excited for yours to grow, and just so you could continue to reach out and talk to so many people. I mean, like you said, the connections are unreal, and like the community that it forms just over time is just really cool. And then you can kind of connect people with other people. It's just, I mean, like it's insane, but it's like, it's the most amazing thing ever. So I'm excited for you.
Cheers. No, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to getting you on my podcast. So I'll have to make the trip down your way. I like to do them all in person at the moment. So it'd be really cool to meet you and eventually have you on the pod. It'd be really cool.
Definitely count me in. Or if I make it up there for Pat's restaurant, we'll make it happen then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any way possible, we'll make it happen. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And his, if you're listening, guys, his podcast is called Vedge Talk. So be sure to go subscribe to that, because he's doing an amazing job. And I know it's just going to continue to get even more amazing. So go give him a subscribe, write a positive review, because that really helps podcasts a lot. So go do that. And so Matt, just anything else that you're working on in the future that you want to put out there, or just continue to make podcasts, put out more content? Just anything you want to put out there and share?
Yeah, so I suppose for the time being, I'm just going to use my spare time to record podcasts with people that are doing really cool things within the movement. So yeah, I want to cover like a broad spectrum, because it is cool to see how far reaching it is. You can have ultra athletes, you can have power athletes in the NFL, you can have authors, activists, farm sanctuary owners, politicians. It's just so far reaching that, people of all ages as well. That's the other cool thing. I did an activism event not that long ago, and I met a guy. He was into his 50s, and his daughter had led by example, and him and his wife ended up going plant-based, but he was doing the activism at this Cube of Truth event. And the passion that he had was, really, really amazing. So I'll definitely be getting him on at some point. His name's Ken, his wife, Michelle, if they're listening. And
shout out to Ken.
Yeah.
Hey, Michelle.
The passion was unreal. It really it was like a huge breath of fresh air to see that. And I've been busy kind of going down to New York, New Jersey, the last couple of weekends, but they're up in New England. So I'll be getting up to them as soon as I can for sure. But just going on with that, and hopefully I'll have a website at some point as well. And that way I can start writing more in my spare time as well. And that's really all. But hopefully this is a really good opportunity for me to travel a bit around the country, meet some new people, and just share some really cool stories. I know I've got some cool ones coming along.
Awesome. No, I love it. And I'm excited to hear all of the new ones that come out. And and Matt, what is the best way for people to follow you on social media? That way they can keep up when new episodes come out and just everything that you're doing.
So easiest way to follow me is on Instagram. It's just at Vedge Talk. It's VEDGETALK. And if you like photography, I've also got a photography account. It's at Matt, MATTX, Davey, DAVEY. So they're kind of like my two passions outside of, in my, that I kind of cultivate in my spare time. And that's really, really the best way.
Perfect. If you guys are listening, go give him a follow and tell him you heard him on the podcast. And Matt, just the closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's been something that's been your biggest takeaway through your wellness journey so far. But if you just had one piece of advice to give, what would it be?
I'd say be open-minded. So I think if I can give an example, again, growing up working in that deli, I tell this story nearly every time that I speak with someone. But basically, I worked in the meat case and the cheese case, and there was an employee there that worked in the produce case. And he so happened to be a vegetarian, and I was not. So you couldn't really paint the picture any clearer. I'm literally standing in the meat case, and he's putting, fruits and vegetables on the shelf. And we used to have debates, things about do animals feel pain? Why are you vegetarian? Why don't you eat meat? I was very closed-minded. I wasn't open to listening what he had to say. I just wanted to win the debate. I just wanted to talk over the top and get my message across. And that's another huge thing about the podcast is it forces me to listen and really be present and take time to hear the other person's perspective. So I would say in anyone's wellness journey, just be open. Don't take everything as gospel. Don't believe everything that everyone says, but be open to hearing other people's opinions. And that way you can go home, get some research done, and then start to ask more why questions yourself. That would be, if I could go back, that would be definitely something I'd tell myself.
No, that's perfect, Matt. I love that. And just thank you so much for taking time to come on. I loved having you, and I'm just excited to see all of the amazing work that you put out. So just thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. Really, really stoked you could have me on today, Casey. Cheers.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Matt. He's doing so much positive work, so be sure to give him a follow on social media to keep up with everything that he's been working on. You can find his social media links and podcast links that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. That's drkaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Matt's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Matt, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. Also, be sure to check out patreon.com/Dr. Casey Johnson to learn more about how you can support the Unlock Wellness podcast. Thank you guys so much again for tuning into today's episode. I hope you loved it. I hope it inspires you. And most importantly, I hope you take action.